Hey everyone, welcome to Chris's Tips, Tricks, and Things. Today I'm going to show you how to make one of these. It's a neat little tool I came up with for texturing foam, and I call it... I don't know what I call it. I just thought I would think up something just then, but my mind is blank. So if you can think up a good name, put it in the comments, and while you're doing that, let's get into it.
Okay, so the main ingredient here is a hair straightener I got at the thrift store for $2. And the other ingredient is a flat sheet of aluminum. I did not have a flat sheet of aluminum, but what I did have was half a decorative tray with roses on it and a big hammer. In no time at all, that tray was as flat as something that's kind of flat. Trace around the hair straightener, add a section that's going to stick out from the hair straightener, but actually give it a bit more space on the other side that I'm drawing here. I did end up retracing this with a slightly different shape, as you'll see in the next clip, but I forgot to film it, so this is what you get. There we go, that's the shape I ended up using. Apparently I also forgot to film cutting it out. I rounded off the edges on both sides with a file, and then smoothed them out with some really fine sandpaper. I drew some handy little tabs on one side, and drilled some small holes at the end of each tab leg, using my Australian ruler to make sure everything is lined up in a nice line. I grabbed my jeweler's saw and cut those tabs out, starting at one hole and following the line. I did some tab hammering, using a flattened nail as a punch to get those tabs partway down, and then with the help of my grandpa's little anvil, kept working on them until they were a 90-degree bend. Turns out I made those tabs way too long for my hair straightener, so I cut them down with my jeweler's saw. Clamped my aluminum sheet with rose detail back in the hair straightener, and traced along the edge of the heating plate on the other side. Now it's back to drawing tabs, drilling tabs, cutting tabs, hammering tabs, trimming tabs, and filing tabs. And fits like a glove. A hard, metal, uncomfortable glove. The last thing we need is a way to keep that hair straightener clamped shut, and I'm using the high-tech method of a zip tie. The only problem is it's a little tricky to turn on or know what temperature you're set at. But hey, for $2 and a decorative plate, I'm not complaining. Now let's take this contraption for a test drive. What I like about this is it's not so hot that it's actually burning the foam and creating fumes. It is, however, hot enough to make lasting indentations in the foam. And handily we've made it with a different profile on each side, so we can use the curved side for curvy lines, and the squared corner when we need to get in nice and tight for some detail. Look, I'm making some tree bark. I also found it worked really well for making the texture I used on some of my horns. I'll show you that, as well as a bunch of other ways to texture horns in an upcoming video, so make sure you stay tuned. And you know a good way to stay tuned? Subscribing to my channel, of course.
Alright, there we go, hair straightener texturing tool tutorial. Just for you. So I see a lot of people showing how to texture foam using a soldering iron, and that works really well, but it does burn the foam and create a lot of fumes. And I just started to get a bit worried that there were a bunch of people sitting in their basements texturing foam with soldering irons without fume extraction or a good respirator. Is that you? Don't let that be you, okay? Anyways, I think this is kind of a good happy medium. It doesn't create as deep a texture as using a soldering iron would because it's not actually really burning the foam. It's more like it's heat forming the foam. So it's warming up the foam, pressing it in, and then as the foam cools, it stays sort of pressed down like that, and that's what creates the texture in the foam. And one of the good things about that is if you haven't gone too deep, you can heat up your foam with a heat gun and some of that texture will come out if you wanted to. I'm still going to recommend wearing a respirator because you don't know what gases are off-gassing just from heating it up anyways. Some of my thoughts on this contraption. One is I think it's important to get this edge polished up really nice and smooth. I was finding that as I was dragging it across the foam sometimes, it was almost like dragging and catching little bits in the bottom, so there were little sort of pits in the bottom of the groove that I was making, which isn't totally what you want. So I think if you smooth that out a bit, that would help. Oh yeah, the thickness of the metal I used here, I don't think I mentioned in the video, 1.5 millimeters thick, that's what I'm using. Also, obviously, depending on what kind of hair straightener you find, it's gonna be different, and you're gonna need to figure out your own way to get that piece of metal to stay in there. The main thing is just to make sure that it's clamped tight enough so when you're pressing down on it, this doesn't flick out and burn your hand off, or fall on the carpet and melt it, or fall on a cat or a goldfish. Also annoying is that in order to get at the button to turn it on and off, I have to get in between there with some sort of implement, and I don't know what heat I've turned this on to, although I'm basically using the hottest temperature. Of course, I guess I can't complain for something that cost me less than a used waffle maker. Anyways, I think that's all I have to say. I will have a video coming out sometime in the future showing how I use this tool to texture this horn, as well as a bunch of other ways to texture horns, some of which you've probably never even thought of. So stay tuned for that, and until I see you next time, thanks for watching. See ya.